Hello and welcome to a special episode. I'm talking to John Hegarty. He's in India to attend a conference on creativity, but also to enjoy the weather and to spend some time at his office. We're going to be talking about how advertising is changing and how it's impacting the lives of people on the marketing side as well as on the advertising agency side. John, welcome to India once again.
Great to be here.
So to begin with, a big question. What is your view on the state of advertising in the world today?
Well, that is a very, very big question. So I think that the first thing you have to do is you have to say, you have to talk about the business of advertising and the advertising industry. So I think I answer it in those two ways. I think the business of advertising is in a very bad way. I think clients are increasingly lacking in understanding of how advertising works or how to build brands. I think their understanding of the fundamentals of brand building is in a serious way. And that's a big concern. And you can see that with the quality of work that's being produced. The advertising industry should be in a very strong place because we increasingly live in a world where brands are more and more important, and brand building is obviously therefore crucially important. And so therefore, you've got this conundrum. The business is in a terrible state, investment in advertising going down, fees being cut, and yet the advertising industry should be in a powerful place.
Why isn't it so?
Well, because I think our clients, as I've said, I think by and large have a failing of how to actually make the industry work. I mean, you look at, the state of television, and you look at what's happening in television, the most powerful brand building tool ever created, and the quality of work in that medium is going down. As I always say, this isn't my opinion.
Right,
this
sure.
is the opinion of the audience when asked, do you think advertising is as good as it used to be? They say no. So you're in a peculiar place of a business that thinks it can improve its product by making it worse. I don't know what industry would ever follow that sort of business practice. So you have a kind of almost a belief that you can build a brand by spending less, that investment isn't needed. I can do it for free digitally, and we've completely confused persuasion and promotion over the last 15 years. I think there's a sort of lack of understanding that brands need to both persuade and to promote. The digital medium is wonderful at promotion. It's not very good at persuasion.
John, but who's going to sort of bell the cat and discuss this issue and sort of bring it out in the open?
Well, eventually, the falling profits of these brands will make it, force itself into the open as they realize their brands aren't as strong as they used to be. And their shareholders will turn around and say, why are our brand values going down?
But that you're presuming that they will link up falling profits to brand building.
Well, I think if you're investing in a company, the value of that brand is fundamentally important. Fundamentally important. As we always say, when Kraft bought Cadbury's in the UK, they didn't buy Cadbury's because they had some nice factories and it was in a nice part of the country and the machinery was particularly good. They bought Cadbury's because it had tremendous brand values. And unless you go on investing in those, you're not investing in the future of that company.
So who should take the lead in sort of correcting this? Because there's not a problem peculiar to India or England or the US. It's happening across the world.
Well, I think collectively the industry should be addressing it, but the industry is a very fragmented industry. And you've got those in the industry who believe actually that really I'll build my group by just growing my digital capability and forget about broadcast, forget about persuasion, because actually that's becoming too difficult. And so they're investing more and more in their digital product, which I kind of completely understand, but what they've got to be very careful of is that when you're selling a digital product, increasingly competition in that area will be easier and easier as more and more people get the technology. So you're losing out on the bit that you can really put value in, the bit about persuasion. Persuasion is the hardest thing in the world to do, the hardest thing to get right. Get it right and a brand will take off. I mean, you almost can't talk today without mentioning Apple in terms of a brand that has been brilliantly managed, which, by the way, has virtually built that brand on conventional medium, television, posters, print, conventional advertising. They hardly do any digital work at all. The most valuable brand in the world selling technology. It's a very salutary lesson, I think, for people. But I think there's been also a kind of a suspension of questioning. And I often sit down with clients and I hear them say, we've got to create a kind of a community around our product, and we've got to, and you think, you make a marmalade. I don't want to have a conversation with a pot of marmalade. I'm not that interested. I don't have enough time to have a conversation with the people I like. And there's a sort of suspension of reality. And I think that happens. You see that happening all the time, where people suddenly, have drunk the Kool-Aid and they don't know how to question. They don't know how to apply some intellectual arguments to things that are being presented to them. And I think companies are suffering.
Yeah, but John, repeatedly, we've seen this for the last 4 or 5 years. It's just getting worse. And is there any sort of example that you can think of where a newish company, born in the last 5 years, 8 years, 10 years, seems to get the advertising right? The last example you're giving me is Apple, which is a 30-year-old company. But can you think of a recent company which seems to be getting brand building right?
Well, I think if you look in the UK, you look at some of the big retailers are beginning to understand how to sustain their brand values through the conventional word of television. And we now have a phenomena in the UK where pre-Christmas, all the big supermarkets, all the big retailers put out their Christmas ad, and the population in the UK comments on it. It becomes a talking point. It becomes, is the John Lewis ad better than the Sainsbury's ad that was very daring? Is the Waitrose ad better than the Tesco ad? Is the Tesco ad better than the Morrison's ad? You've got to, and all of a sudden, because people are doing interesting things in that place, that they're driving a conversation, they're driving brand values, and actually, they're driving sales, lo and behold. Isn't that amazing? I mean, and I think so that you have as a perfect example of, and then how they're tying that together. That's the other important thing. They're then producing these great pieces of communication and then tying it into their digital products in a way which makes it a really holistic communications program. And that's what you have to do. And I think if you do that and you get that right, the rewards are huge, because few people are out there doing it and doing it well. So there's a real opportunity.
One of the problems we have in India, certainly, I don't know how bad it is in the UK, is that young people don't want to join advertising because there's not enough respect in it, there's not enough money in it. So how would you react to a statement like that?
Well, I understand that. I understand that, young people look at advertising and go, well, I don't necessarily want to be in that industry. I think that's a nature of competition, though. It's also to do with the fact there are many other places for them to go. And I think that we as an industry have to recognize that, really talented people could go into any number of industries right now, not necessarily as it used to be, just advertising or design or something like that.
So if you were 23, would you have gotten to advertising? If you're 23 today?
I think, in a funny way, I always say I would. I still think it's one of the most exciting industries you can be in. I think the variety of what you do, the people you're exposed to, the briefs you're exposed to, I think it makes an exciting industry. However, you've got to go into and get into the right kind of company that believes in creativity as a tool for persuasion, and doesn't just pay lip service to big data or whatever it might be. I think the other thing I would say, increasingly I feel this about advertising, and why I think it's in a slightly parlous state, is that global advertising that many clients have adopted just isn't working. And it's very interesting, actually. We're looking at if you take the UK as an example, you're seeing overall beer sales declining, not by a huge amount, but in decline. But yet you're seeing craft breweries rocketing up, taking a greater and greater share of beer sales. And when you look at the kind of marketing activities of craft breweries, how they relate to the audience that they're making their product for, you begin to understand why, as opposed to some major beer brand that's created some global campaign that talks to everybody and is understood by no one. And you realize they've become disconnected from their audience. And I think global advertising is gradually sliding into irrelevance. And it was interesting, actually. I was giving a talk recently, and I was introduced as John Hegarty from BBH, whose advertising became part of the cultural fabric of society. And I suddenly thought, that's very interesting. How much advertising today is becoming a part of the cultural fabric of society? Because surely that's what you're trying to do. Because if you can make your brand a part of the cultural fabric of that society, you will reap rich rewards. If you just create something that runs everywhere, that nobody notices, that doesn't bother anybody, it is just a complete waste of money. And I think that's a problem that advertising has. Of course, this is being sold by huge multinationals who want the clients to go on doing this, and clients like it because it saves money on production. But increasingly, they're producing work that nobody pays any attention to, so it's money wasted.
Yeah, I was asking about this 23-year-old kid getting into advertising. He said he's got to choose the right agency or the right firm. Now, on the flip side, do the marketers know how to choose the right agency or the right firm?
Well, I think, obviously we've seen the rise of procurement as an important factor in how companies buy their products and services. And I think the danger in procurement is it's the old thing of the price of everything and the value of nothing. And I think that they're in danger of just putting a slide rule against what an agency produces, not looking at the value of what they produce, and not understanding that sometimes you have to pay a bit more to get something better. Again, it's a weird market we operate in, is where clients think if you charge more, it can't be very good. Whereas if you pay more for a car, you have a great feeling that it's going to be a better car. And of course, you get what you pay for in this life. So I think clients' understanding of purchasing advertising is somewhat crude. I don't think it's as good as it should be. I don't think they pay enough attention to it. You might say to me, well, why should they? Well, it's rather crucial to their brand's success that they buy the right kind of partner, providing the right kind of service to enhance the value of that brand.
And I'm going to sort of provoke you a bit here. Has advertising failed to tell its story, the industry as a whole? Have they failed to tell people how much they actually contribute to the bottom line of businesses?
Well, I think I would say absolutely. It's not a provocative question. I think it's a very pertinent question. I think the great problem is that we are by and large a very fractured industry, although there are the big groups now, but we're in such serious opposition to each other that we can never agree to do anything together. And I think advertising has failed to make its case. I think it's failed to explain what it is it does. And I think it has been undermined by the rise of digital. How does it cope with the opportunities that digital presented to us? Because obviously it presented phenomenal opportunities. But I think it's kind of failed to kind of explain to a client how all of these bits work together. And that's really what a client probably would love to hear. How does it all work together? So what they suffer from is increasing voices in different ears, whispering all kinds of things about what they should or shouldn't do. I mean, in the end, the voice that comes through says, you can do it on the internet for a lot less. That's the voice they listen to, which isn't necessarily the right voice.
Right. I don't know what it's like in the UK, but here in India, you see a lot of creative professionals over 50 who sort of struggle with with the threat of digital because they don't quite get digital. So what would you say to them in terms of advice? What could you tell them?
Well, I would say to them in life, principles don't change, practices do. The skill is to get people around you who do understand that and focus on the bits that you know how to create. And what you probably know, if you've been successful, is you know how to come up with a big brand idea that stitches your communication program together. Because, increasingly in a fractured world, what you need is a single brand voice consistently coming out with an interesting message. A message that's constantly refreshed, but not one that's changing all the time. And I think you understand that, and that is your value to a brand, to explain how that's fundamentally important. I explain this so stop thinking about advertising for a moment. Think about the James Bond franchise. You're in charge of the James Bond franchise, all right? Books were written in the 1950s. First film was made, I think, about 1962, Dr. No. Had a hero in it called James Bond, 007, License to Kill. What does the franchise carry today? Same thing, James Bond, 007, License to Kill. But what they've done with that brand is they've constantly refreshed it, constantly kept it up to date. They've had many people playing James Bond. What they haven't done is gone, maybe we should have a female Bond. It should be Jamie Bond. No, that's not what the brand's about. So what they've understood is how to constantly refresh. And I think brands should pay attention to how these movie franchises operate, how they actually maintain real value and keep themselves relevant to their audience. And a constantly changing audience.
So tell me, why does Apple get it right? Why does James Bond get it right? Why do they get it right, and why can't large brands?
Because I think in the end they have people running those brands who understand the value of what it is that they have.
Have you ever worked on a James Bond a film or
no,
or an Apple?
Or Apple. I've worked on neither actually, but I think it's just very interesting when because we always talk about advertising, but we don't realize there are other franchises out there, other brands out there that are just as powerful, if not more profitable than your one, making a fortune for their brand owners. And maybe you should be learning some lessons from those, And what do people talk about? When the James Bond movie comes out, what do they talk about? They talk about the new Bond movie. Are they talking about your new campaign in the same way? No. Are you making headlines like that? No. Do you understand the power of fame? No. That's what you should be thinking about. And creating value for your brand.
Right. Finally, John, I'm going to ask you, famously you have resigned some accounts, you have sacked some accounts rather, to be more accurate.
Yeah.
So what does it take for an agency to be able to tell the account to get lost?
Well, I think, at BBH we have resigned a number of pieces of business. So we always do that with great regret. We feel it's sort of partly a failure on our part, so it's not something we enjoy doing, we like doing. But at sometimes you realize a brand and you have grown differently, a bit like a marriage, you get divorced. We had a wonderful relationship with Levi's that went on for some 23, 24, 25 years. And we realized that what they wanted from their communication program isn't something that we were able to provide, and so therefore we were constantly at loggerheads, and we felt it was only best if we said, look, it's been wonderful, but maybe we should go our own separate ways. And there is always sadness to that, but it's an inevitability sometimes in life. You have to do it.
Right. So tell me a few great campaigns you've seen in the last year.
The last year, great campaigns. Well, funny enough, actually, I'll go back to what I was saying, and the things that I've been most impressed with is what's happening with the retail sector in the UK and how it's really beginning to create work that's talked about. So, last year, Christmas last year, we looked at Sainsbury's producing a very daring piece of creative work about the value of presents and what they mean for Christmas. We looked at John Lewis, another great retailer in the UK, continuing their run of great ads. So those are the ones that I'm most impressed with, because I think in a way too, you're looking at a kind of category where a lot of poor advertising has been executed for a very long time, and a number of people have come along and dared to do something different and have shown terrific results in doing that. So those are the ones I look at, and those are the ones that I most admire.
Right. So John, when do we see you next in India, and what do we see you come here for?
I'm here obviously because it's wonderful to be in our office in Mumbai, which I absolutely adore. Funny enough, I really like the weather. You know, I must be one of the few people who do, because it's really hot out there, but I love it. And I'm here for a conference on creativity, and I'm talking about that and how great ideas, how they can cross borders, cultural barriers, and yet still be effective.
Thank you very much, John. Thank you.
Anant, great.
Thank you. With that, we come to an end of this fantastic conversation with John. Hopefully the next time John comes here, or one of us is in London or Cannes, we'll catch up with him again. Thank you so much.